We need to sue the FDA and litigate them and take them into court, because what they're doing is they're destroying a multi-billion-dollar industry. And guess what? It affects the farmer.
That's Chris Boucher, hemp pioneer and CEO of Farmtiva. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today I'm going to talk to Chris Boucher about all kinds of things, like suing the FDA, his friendship with Jack Herer, that time back in '94 when the USDA gave him permission to grow hemp in California. And speaking of California, wait until you hear about the California Bureau of Cannabis Control and how it's making things pretty difficult for hemp farmers. So all that and more. We'll take a quick sponsor break, come back with a few nuggets of hemp news, and then get into my conversation with Chris Boucher. This episode is brought to you in part by Impactful Ventures, an investment and incubation company focused on supporting startups and other initiatives that play a vital role in reversing the adverse effects of climate change. They strive to amplify enterprises which bring innovative green opportunities to the forefront and empower those making a significant impact for a sustainable future. You can learn more at impactfulventures.org. This episode is brought to you in part by IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. IND Hemp. Okay, welcome back. So the main news nugget this week is the Cannabis Administration and Opportunities Act. This is Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's bill to federally legalize cannabis. It just dropped yesterday, July 21st, so obviously there are still lots of questions here. And maybe the biggest one is, can the Democrats actually get this passed in the current climate of dysfunction and obstructionism and, the general brokenness of our Congress and political system?
Industrial hemp.
And of course, there are questions about what this bill will mean for the hemp industry. I've reached out to some smart, legally minded hemp people to get their take, so I should have more information for you on next week's show. So the bill is 296 pages long. I have not read it, but there is a summary published at democrats.senate.com, so I'm going to read you some of that now because it looks as though they are changing the definition of hemp, which of course will have implications on the industry. So here we go. The definition of cannabis. Stakeholders offered a variety of recommendations in response to the discussion draft's request for comment on the definition of cannabis. The existing definition of cannabis faces a number of challenges related to the existing definition of hemp. Under the discussion draft, the terms cannabis and cannabis product excluded hemp, as defined in Section 297A of the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1946. The definition of hemp was established in 2018 generally as any part or derivative of the plant Cannabis sativa L with a delta-9 THC concentration of not more than 0.3% by dry weight. Under regulations, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has determined that this THC amount is calculated as the sum of delta-9 THC in a sample and a portion of the non-intoxicating THC acid, THCA, that can be converted to delta-9 THC through decarboxylation or combustion. Members of the hemp industry have raised concerns that the existing testing methodology that takes into account THCA content results in an allowable THC threshold below a commercially practicable amount. Other stakeholders have raised concerns that existing laws' reference to delta-9 THC concentration fails to account for different types of THC that can have a similar effect on the user, such as hemp-derived delta-8 THC and delta-10 THC, which already exist in the marketplace. Stakeholders have also raised concerns that the dry weight measurement standard in existing law may create situations where industry members may be able to manipulate the amount of allowable THC by increasing the overall weight of a cannabis product, thereby avoiding tax and public health requirements. The introduced legislation refines the definition of hemp and consequently cannabis by taking into account the total THC in a cannabis product rather than just Delta-9 THC. The legislation also modifies the allowable amount of THC to provide separate allowances for plant material and extracts. For plant material, hemp is any cannabis plant material with a total THC content of 0.7% on a dry weight basis or less. For extracts, concentrations, and other cannabis preparations, a product only qualifies as hemp if the total THC concentration of an article does not exceed 1 milligram of total THC per 100 grams on a dry weight basis. The Secretary of Health and Human Services may also include or exclude one or more cannabinoids from this definition as appropriate. The legislation further clarifies that while THC derived from the cannabis plant is descheduled under the Controlled Substances Act, synthetic cannabis and other non-cannabis derived THC are not subject to automatic descheduling. The legislation requires that the Attorney General initiate a review of the applicable CSA schedules for such non-cannabis derived THC substances within 1 year of enactment and reschedule those substances as appropriate pursuant to the CSA. All right, you got all that? Interesting. What does it mean? We'll find out. All right, so a few other things to know about the Cannabis Administration and Opportunities Act. Basically, they're going to remove cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act and create a framework to regulate and tax the hell out of cannabis. The bill also addresses public safety concerns, opens up new avenues for more research, and tries to repair the damage caused by the failed war on drugs, which, let's face it, has really been a war on black men in this country since Nixon started the war on drugs in 1971. As a side note here, I have been watching the Michael Pollan series about psychedelics on Netflix called How to Change Your Mind, and one of the people on the show summed it up like this, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's like we were told that there were good drugs and bad drugs. And those good drugs eventually caused the opioid crisis, while the bad drugs, the ones that were criminalized, actually have vast therapeutic benefits. But I digress. So yeah, the Cannabis Administration and Opportunities Act is the big news this week. But I have a couple of updates. So last week I mentioned that the Pennsylvania Hemp Summit is scheduled for November 14th and 15th in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And it looks like I'm going to be doing some kind of live podcast at the reception on that Monday night, November 14th, sort of like we did back in 2019. And it looks like
we're putting the band back together.
Forget it. No way.
We're on a mission from God.
You know, the Tin Bird Shadow played at that event sort of as my backing band. It was a lot of fun, and I think we're going to do that again this year. More details on that. If you're looking for some Pennsylvania hemp events sooner than November, there will be a field day at King's Agri-Seeds Farm in Lancaster County on August 16th and 17th, as well as a Twilight Hemp Walk at Penn State's Southeastern Research and Extension Center on the evening of August 16th. So I'll have links to those things on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. Oh, and speaking of Penn State's hemp research, this week they sent me a hemp field scouting report on pests in Chester and Lancaster counties. And so the main pests that we're seeing here are Japanese beetles and leaf miners. So I'll have a link to that full report on the show page for the episode at lancasterfarming.com. And one more thing before we get into my conversation with Chris Boucher. Last week's show, if you remember, was devoid of music because I made the mistake of reading the comments on our YouTube channel where this Australian guy named Dan asked if I would do one show for him without the music. So apparently he doesn't like music, but I do, so the music is back. All right, so let's get into my conversation with Chris Boucher from Farmtiva. Chris Boucher, CEO of Farmtiva. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Eric. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast.
Absolutely. This is quite an honor. You know, you have quite a reputation in the hemp space, one of the early pioneers. So I wonder first if you could just sort of give our listeners an introduction, and then we'll get into some of those interesting stories.
Yeah, great. Well, we can date stamp it. I started my first hemp company in 1990. It was called the Hempstead Company. We became one of the largest hemp companies probably in the world with 4,000 stores in 15 different countries all throughout the 90s. We made hemp wallets, hemp bags, hemp hats. And back then, the only place you could get hemp was either in China or Hungary, Romania, or Poland.
Hmm.
And so I went over to China in '92, and we sourced the hemp there. Um, but my real roots in the beginning was I was in a store in Van Nuys, California, and I had been making cotton backpacks at the time, 1990, and a gentleman asked me to sign a hemp petition. And I did not know what hemp was. I said, "What is hemp?" And he turned around and said, "This is what hemp is. I'm an author of a book I wrote. We're trying to legalize hemp in California. I'd like your signature, and I can explain to you what hemp is." 6 hours later, I left the store. The guy's name was Jack Hara, and he took me through each chapter, and it basically changed my life. Everything
Wow.
I knew in school, pretty much, I want to say it was a lie, but they just took out all the information. So from that moment on, I was like, let's change the world. This is the greatest environmental product commodity ever grown. So, and it was American. It was really the roots of America and how we were successful in commerce and global commerce and shipping and so forth and so on. So
Right.
I started the hemp company, and we were just really wanted to bring hemp back to America. That's, if you look at my old ads, we used to say "Made in America" because we would buy the fabrics from the Chinese, from the Hungarians and the Romanians, but we cut and sewed it in California. We wanted to have some type of, Americans touching it and sewing it so we could put "Made in America."
Sure.
And then one day I decided in 1994, let's grow it in America. I went to the USDA in Brawley, California, and I explained to them what I was doing, and I showed them all the information. And they actually had contacts in Washington, D.C., and they actually had permission to grow hemp from the 1940s. It was still on their books. So
Wow.
we grew a couple acres of hemp in 1994 in California. Everyone said, "You'll never, ever do it. You're crazy." And it just kind of pushed me to do it, and became the first, Americans to grow hemp since really World War II.
Wow.
And we grew it. Unfortunately, it was cut down by the local police for the THC levels. There was no recognition at the time of zero point 0.3.
Right. You were the
And
first Americans to grow hemp, but also the first American to get shut down by the local narcotics officers.
yeah, yeah, but and they didn't want to charge us. I mean, we had permits and contracts from the USDA.
Hmm.
We had permits from the local agricultural commissioner, and so that really pushed everything in motion for legislation, legalization of hemp,
Hmm.
and it was a conduit. And moving forward from '94, we didn't stop. We continued, and then in '99, 2000, the DEA just really saw the hemp industry exploding,
Hmm.
and they decided to reinterpret the congressional hemp laws. And their reinterpretation was that Congress never really meant for people to have hemp. It was they didn't know what they were doing, basically. So the DEA sent letters to all the stores, especially if you made hemp lotions, hemp creams. This was pre-CBD. This was just hemp seed oil.
Okay.
And they tried to outlaw hemp seeds and hemp seed oil, and they started seizing my containers. We became one of the largest importers of seeds and seed oil in in '99, 2000. And we actually ended up suing the DEA. It's a landmark case called the HIA versus the DEA.
Hmm.
It took about 3 or 4 years. We won in 2004, the Ninth Court of Appeals. And the judges basically told the DEA, "You guys don't make laws. If you don't like the hemp law, you need to go to Congress, because they're the ones that make laws, and have them change the law."
Sure.
Well, obviously they didn't, but it really snuffed the industry out for years to come. Then, of course, in about 2011, I was hired by a company in San Diego, Hemp Meds and Cannabis, and I was asked to help draft a legal opinion. And I'm not a lawyer, but I've been involved in every piece of hemp legislation in California, probably 8 different pieces of legislation since '95. And I co-drafted an opinion called Hemp CBD is legal in all 50 states. And I was actually kicked out of the Hemp Industries Association, which I'm one of the co-founders. I didn't explain that in my history, but I founded the HIA, Hemp Industries Association, with 3 other people in 1992, not 94, but 92. And so they just said they just didn't understand it. And so a lot of the hemp groups were like, this is fraud. There's no such thing as CBD. And we explained to them, hey, it's the main constituent in hemp. It's what makes hemp and marijuana different. The ratio of CBD to THC, they're opposites. So we wrote that legal opinion. And at the time I was farming about 1,000 hectares in the Czech Republic, and we were growing fiber strains. And we were taking the tops of the fiber strains that were about 6-7% CBD, and we were pelletizing them, and we were making CBD oil, and we imported it into the United States. So we were the first people to import like 500 kilos of raw hemp CBD paste. We cleared U.S. Customs. We cleared Homeland Security. I mean, I thought I might go to jail if they seized it and said, "What is this?" But we used the harmonized tariff codes, the United States harmonized tariff codes underneath hemp oil, cannabis sativa. So it was completely legal, and we just would put the legal opinion inside the packages of hemp oil we were sending across the country in case the feds or the police seized it. When they would open the box, it was a 5-page legal opinion saying hemp CBD is legal. Okay. So, but anyways, fast forward by 2013, 14, everyone started copying our legal opinion and saying, we're going to do this too. Cause it was like, striking gold.
Sure.
And that's really how the business industry started. Of course, CBD was around with Ringo and up in Humboldt, California, with the breeding back in 2005, 6. But the real commerce started when our legal opinion, we were able to import it in the United States and distribute it and sell it underneath U.S. harmonized tariff codes. So a lot of people don't know there's several harmonized tariff codes that it's called True Hemp. The original name of hemp, the United States government, was True Hemp, and that's what we used to call it. But unfortunately, we had some issues, and people called it industrial hemp, which we didn't want. So, long story short, that was one battle we lost. In the beginning, we called it the True Hemp Industries.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. What did you sort of have against the name industrial hemp?
Well, because hemp started as an environmental movement. We wanted to clean up the soil. We knew the fiber, the fabrics and oil and food. And it was one of the best environmental crops we knew of compared to any other crop that existed. So a group of people, and people that I knew, liked the name industrial. And to us, it sounded like a toxic, polluting name, industrial. It doesn't sound environmental. Right. And we're in a democracy, so sometimes you lose. Your opinions get snuffed out. So True Hemp died in 1992. That's when we started the Hemp Industries Association. And the first year, there was only 6 of us. And then by the following year in 94, we invited about 100 people across the country for our annual meeting. And they voted it out, and we lost. And they didn't want to use the name True Hemp Industries Association. They changed it to the Hemp Industries Association. But again, that's a whole other battle that took place early on during the development of the United States modern hemp revolution, we'll call it.
Sure. You said around the time of your legal opinion that was maybe the cause of the division that got you booted out of the HIA?
Yeah, the HIA vote hemp. And I know these people. I've known them for 20 years. And they just didn't believe or understand that, when you're not educated on the science of a product. I think once people were educated and they realized, well, wait a sec, he is correct. Cannabidiol is not in the controlled substance, the CSA. It's not federally illegal. There's no mention of it. So how could it be illegal if there's no mention of cannabidiol? It's cannabinoids and THC is mentioned. So we took that route. And Mike Lamas, who was the founder of the hemp meds, he was a younger guy. And at first I was skeptical, but once I saw the analogy, it would be like having, oranges and grapefruits, and someone says, well, grapefruits are illegal and oranges are legal, but they're both in the citrus family.
Right.
So the laws are based on, as Jack Herrera taught me, is wordsmithing. You have to be a linguist to really understand what these words and how powerful they are and what they mean. So we were able to get through a crack in the wall. And the DEA, of course, they didn't want to come after us. They just already lost a major battle, a few years earlier. So the CBD revolution just exploded. And, here we are today. And, I don't take claim for it, but I definitely was there writing that opinion. And, other people were doing CBD, but it wasn't legal to actually, they weren't sure if it was legal or not. And we really defined it.
Right. Let's get back to Jack Herrera. So you met him there at a store in what'd you say, Van Nuys, California?
Yeah, and Captain Ed Heads and High, which was one of the famous. It was a psychedelic shop. As back then, if you wanted a concert shirt, you wanted tie dyes. They didn't sell it anywhere else. Yeah. And he owned it, and he changed my life that day. And I ended up being, he was my mentor. Right. So once I got the hemp wallets and bags, I would give it to him, and he was the leader of the whole movement, and of course the famous author. And so I became one of his best friends, and I was the best man at his wedding with Jeannie. Wow. And so he really taught me well, I can just say that. So we really supported the movement back then, and it was, like I said, environmental. We would go to the federal building in Los Angeles and have 1,000 people surround the federal building and have concerts and rallies to legalize hemp. And and no one knew what it was, so you spent 90% of your time just educating people what hemp was, and people got upset because they were like, wait a sec, why didn't they tell me George Washington grew hemp? Why didn't they tell me Thomas Jefferson? Right. Why didn't they tell me every ship and boat that crossed the ocean was powered by hemp? So that got frustrating to a lot of people. Like, well, why would they take that out of the history books?
Why would they lie to us? Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, exactly. And so, and it was an eye opener. So it opened a lot of doors. Yes.
Well, that book came into my life, I think, in '94. I was like a college dropout in Boulder, Colorado for the summer, and that book sort of landed on our front porch on Arapahoe Avenue, and it blew my mind. Sort of, didn't really change anything for me at the time, but that information was in there. And then years later, I'm covering a field day at the Rodale Institute in Pennsylvania, and it was the summer of 2017, and they were one of the first, permitted hemp growers in Pennsylvania. And there I was standing next to 4 acres of hemp, and it all just came rushing back. And I'm like, oh, this is it. We're doing it. So, that book I know affected a lot of people, but you had more than just the book. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I was fortunate to meet some of the early activists, and especially Jack, and he was just one of the smartest guys I ever met. I mean, he knew everything, and he really, like I said, I tell people, there's no way we would have the hemp movement the way it is today, or even existed, if he didn't write the book. I compare it to having Christianity without the Bible. And he really laid the roots down, and like I said, as and what he did was he traveled to colleges, like 200 or 300 colleges a year, and that's how he got money. He would speak at the colleges and sell his books. And after 10 years of doing that, the word spreads, and plus it's a guaranteed A on any research project. You're teaching the teacher. Right.
That's cool. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. So last week I was talking to an economist who had written a piece about sort of how big cannabis is really having a detrimental effect on the fiber and grain sectors of hemp, sort of costing that side of the industry, like $20 billion a year. And I think you have some opinions about this, because that's sort of happening in California. I wonder if we can talk about what's happening in California, from a big cannabis point of view, regulator point of view, your point of view. What's going
Right.
on out there?
Yes. Yes. And so I'm also the director of the California Hemp Farmers Guild, and we're an advocacy group for hemp farmers.
Okay.
You know, it's all about the farmer. They're the foundation of everything.
Right.
And, you know, since I started drafting the original hemp laws, we always wanted it as an agricultural commodity, not regulated. We didn't want to regulate it like marijuana. It's not marijuana, it's hemp. So what's happened in California is that we've got these associations, and I'll name them, HIA, the Hemp Roundtable. They need money. You know, they've lost all the CBD industry is flatlined, and the big money's gone. So they need money to prop up their association. So Big Cannabis has come in, and they've partnered with Hemp Roundtable, HIA, and again, I know these people, and it's all public information. And so they've crafted these new laws to regulate hemp. And so you wonder why Aurora and Canopy and the cannabis beverage industry is working with hemp associations. And so these new laws are very similar to marijuana. And again, I mentioned wordsmithing and linguistics. So one of the big things they did in California, they changed the name of industrial hemp to Cannabis Sativa, because there's a marijuana groups, the California Department of Cannabis, they're in control and in charge of Cannabis Sativa.
Okay.
So if the definition of industrial hemp is Cannabis Sativa, they're able to regulate it.
It falls
So
under
they
their
said,
jurisdiction. Yeah.
yeah, you know, and there's shady characters in every business. You know, hey, if you're getting your vitamins and your dietary supplements, who's making it, right?
Right.
But they don't pay fees, and they don't pay state like I said, fees, and also opening up their financial books, their employees. So in California now, depending on how many employees you have, they have a tier system. Could cost from $2,000 to $40,000 to make, you know, hemp tinctures, hemp seeds, hemp seed oil, hemp granola bars, hemp
These are like
protein
permit.
powder.
You have to pay for this permit, or that's
It's a permit, and it's a regulatory system.
okay.
What I mean by that, it's designed very similar to marijuana. So you register, and the state inspectors come to your facility. So if you're in Texas, you're in Florida, you're in Pennsylvania, and you're making a hemp-based product, you're going to have to apply to sell in California, and they'll have to inspect your facility to make sure it's a food-grade facility. Plus, you have to disclose your financials when requested. And you also need to disclose your employees. This is what they do with marijuana, because there's marijuana, there's a lot of shady people in the business, and they want to make sure there's no black market behind the scene. And so they really have to control it. And that's what this has done in California. And some people like, well, now we can legally sell it. And our statement is they've been fed false information. Hemp is legal. It's a federal law passed by Congress. The FDA does not make laws, just like the DEA doesn't. It'd be like having a gun or bullets, and California says, well, they're illegal here. Okay, you can't sell them here until we inspect your home, or we look at, you know, who bought it and who made it. So industry should regulate itself. The local state government should be regulating an agricultural commodity that's regulated by the USDA. So it's all these layers that they've put in that.
Yeah, let me jump in, and I got. Yeah, sure it does. It sounds like it. So this cannabis agency is a government, like a state government agency that has now taken over jurisdiction of hemp. Like it had been in I imagine the California Department of Agriculture had been overseeing it, but it's been moved out of that into this cannabis agency?
Yeah, it's been moved into the California Department of Health, and they work in conjunction with the Department of Cannabis Control, the DCC. And we haven't seen, they're still publishing more regulations. And part of this law that they passed, which I can't believe these groups even endorsed, it's called emergency regulation. You can ask your listeners, what does emergency regulation mean? It means they can regulate hemp in California anytime, any place, at any cost without any public input. I mean, this is scary.
Wow.
And, we're waving the flag going, you guys see this. And, some people aren't aware of it till it hits home,
Can you give me an example of like how this has affected, like your average hemp farmer in California?
Yeah, first of all, we've lost 90% of hemp farmers in California. We went from 800 farmers, I think we're down to 120, and how many of them are actually growing. And they've just really made it, farmers don't like filling out tons of paperwork and exposing their employees and opening their financials. And,
Right.
And if they want to like do vertical integration, if they want to, press oil on the farm, they're gonna have to pay for it, and they might not, and it's going to cost them a lot of money because they want everything that's made in a GMP facility, and they don't do that with tomatoes or carrots or broccoli. I mean,
Right.
and from a farmer's point of view, that's how we look at it, as a agricultural commodity, and that's what it is by the federal law, Farm Bill 2018. So they've grabbed a hold of it. And we're trying to figure out how they can go into a store, a health food store or a pet store or a gas station, and say, okay, this CBD company, who are they? What state are they in? Have they applied to California? Did they pay all the fees? Have we inspected them? I mean, it's a nightmare when you start looking at it. But again, not many people see what we see because we're on the front line fighting this.
Yeah.
And we lost AB 45. We tried to prevent it from taking place. We warned everybody, and now it's here. And all of the regulations haven't come out yet. They're still publishing. You can go to the CDPH website, and you can see all the FAQs and what you need to do. You can see the fee schedule, how many employees. I mean, it's a bureaucratic nightmare that hemp should never, ever have to go through.
Wow. And the regulators were lobbied heavily by certain groups.
Yes, you can see the lobbyists from, you got Hemp Roundtable, HIA, California Hemp Council. Then you have Aurora, you've got Canopy. These are billion-dollar companies when you look on their, their valuation on NASDAQ or wherever they trade. And so you have the big companies that endorse this because they want control of cannabinoids. They want all cannabinoids being regulated under marijuana companies because they do get a little upset when they pay $1 million for the dispensary, and you walk out the front door of the marijuana club and across the street they're selling CBD at the gas station or the health food store, and they didn't pay anything. But CBD is not how do I say, compared to hemp. So it's the main molecule in hemp. So it's not marijuana derived. They basically bred all the CBD out of marijuana, because back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, you didn't want CBD in marijuana because it doesn't get you as high. So they bred it out. But we believe hemp derived cannabinoids are the key foundation to the commodity of hemp. And, fast forward, we look over in Europe and we look at the largest hemp fiber companies in Europe. They cannot survive on hemp fiber alone. So they have Dualcrops. They're growing CBD flowers on top, and they come through and they cut the tops, and then they cut the stalks, and the farmers get to sell, they maybe a couple $100 more per acre when they sell the CBD tops. And that really makes the huge difference, because I can tell you right now, fiber alone, I don't know how it's going to make it, because it's a global commodity. It's not like CBD, and there's a price point set on fibers, whether it's hemp fiber, jute fiber, sisal fiber. And so you have to compete there. And if a farmer's only making $300 or $400 an acre, and he can add an extra $600 or $700, whether it's CBD, CBG, so the dual crops are going to be the future, which is happening in Europe, and they're way ahead of us, and they've learned. So we believe, and I definitely see it. I've been doing it for so long, and when I look at the price of fiber and herd, it's going to be it's going to be a tough one to sell to farmers. They might want to grow, I don't know, alfalfa. They might want to grow corn.
Or wheat or
It's
something.
easier. Yeah.
Yeah,
Why
something
do
you
I
don't
want to
need a
grow hemp?
permit for, something that, you don't have people showing up at your farm from the government taking samples. Yeah, something a lot easier.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And we already have to do, FBI background check. And, that's good enough. You pay the local ag commissioner your permit. And that's good enough. You don't have to get the state involved. And they're doing this in many states. But, back to the dual crop and the environmental factor. And the Europeans are like, well, why do you Americans want to, use all this water, all this labor, all this fertilizer and get like one commodity out of it, fiber and herd,
Hmm.
and where you could get a good genetic dual crop and take your, CBD from the tops or maybe even CBG. There's a lot of other molecules that are hemp derived that are very useful. Even some companies in Europe are doing crops. And when you look at it, that's the American way. George and Tom, they all grew tri-crops. They didn't throw anything away. I think they just grew a hemp fiber and they threw the tops away. They grew THC tops and fibers. So, but we don't want to go there. And actually, Jack used to always say that this is what's going to happen. They're going to grow it all under one plant because, again, why would you just only grow one commodity? It doesn't make economic sense.
Right. Especially when the plant has so much to offer in all those places.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to see the dual crop and the genetics, I think, really change here the next few years. And I believe that's going to help the farmer more than anything.
Right. So getting back to California, so these lobbying groups came in and kind of miseducated or misled some regulators into thinking that hemp needed to be regulated more as a drug than a agricultural commodity. And so it freaked everybody out. And
it was all built on a lie. So the state of California, the Department of Health said, hemp is not safe for humans. We don't believe it's legal. The word believe in an FAQ, it's not a law. So what the hemp industry told everybody, hey, hemp's not legal in California, but if we pass this California law, AB 45, it will be legal to sell. And so a lot of people didn't realize an opinion's not a law. Just because the state of California says guns are illegal, they're not. And I don't like using those two analogies, but
sure,
it's just plain and simple so that everyone understands that, you just can't make a federally legal agricultural commodity illegal because you don't like it. That's kind of the bottom line.
And it comes down to competition too, right? I mean, that's why they're trying to get control of it so they don't have to compete.
They believe that hemp people should only farm fiber and seed, and every other cannabinoid known in the plant should be done by marijuana people. And they've spent a lot of money and they've got big money, and they've pushed this misinformation, and they've teamed up with some pretty good, associations that have done some good work.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but the money's running out. This is the way I see it. The money's running out. So when, somebody like Aurora or Canopy or, there's a few other companies I'm, missing, we don't know what they've given them. They will have to disclose it. And it just, to us, is regulation just really hurts the farmer. And
right.
That's our main concern, is the farmer, protecting the farmer, because this is where it's going to take off. If the farmers grow it, it becomes bigger and bigger. But if marijuana takes it over and snuffs the industry out, it's still going to be, I would say just a smaller commodity that's not going to make it to where it should go in terms of billions of dollars.
And that would be a shame because there are so many, environmental benefits to growing, huge quantities of hemp around the world.
And then animal feed, all the animals that could have CBD. They've done all the studies in Europe with the cows. Cows that have CBD, they produce 20% more milk and less stress.
Right.
So there's all, and even horses, the whole poultry industry. And so we just really, it's almost like this, the cannabinoids, hemp derived cannabinoids, are like radioactive. Like we're not sure if we want to touch it yet, you know?
Right.
And again, we have to overcome this fear and understand, hey, it's just a commodity, and it's good for the farmer.
Right. It wouldn't be the first time that hemp has been sort of, been the victim of a smear campaign in order to take care of competition, right? Because isn't that the story of prohibition in the 30s?
Yes, and it's our own people doing the smear campaign,
Right?
but
Wow.
it's all about money. And again, it's.
Well, let's talk about the associations. Like I look around at the landscape, and there's so many different associations, right? And I've had some guests say, there's too many. Like right now, there's no unified voice, and everybody seems to be working against each other. Do you have any thoughts on like consolidation? Do you think that's a good idea? Do you think that could even happen?
It's a tough one because the associations have now turned into revenue streaming businesses in a sense. So when we started the California Hemp Farmers Guild, it's an agricultural farmers guild. It's like a co-op, These aren't co-ops. These are associations that can generate revenue through,
membership fees and things.
Yeah. And they're living on this. This is where they get their money. And now they're doing like Hemp Authority. You get a Hemp Authority stamp approved by them.
Right.
And it's a secondary revenue stream, which, hey, it's okay. I'm not against that. But yes, and these groups, they're not even farmers. Most of these groups are distributors, manufacturers, salespeople. And with our group, you have to be a registered farmer to actually vote.
Okay.
But we accept anyone into our group, but it definitely has convoluted these associations of, again, money. They need money to survive, and they will do all kinds of, cool things or uncool things.
Right. So if I were a regulator and I needed to do some research about, industrial hemp for the Farm Bill or something, and I was looking around and wanted to reach out to an association, it's like roulette wheel, right? You just, who are you going to get, and what are they going to tell you? What's their agenda? That seems dangerous on that respect. But then also from a consumer point of view, if there's all these different sort of like seals of approval, who do you trust? It seems like a bad situation is a brewing.
Exactly. And you just really hit the hammer on the head of the nail of that. And there's so many of these groups, and where do farmers go? Because they want to be protected. And it's really these associations. They, like I said, they've lobbied, they've done some good stuff. But if you're looking for an association, you want somebody that supports non-regulation. When you start getting into a group hemp association that is all about regulation because they want to control the industry, they want to make sure it's clean and safe. Well, that's what a free market economy is about, and that's how businesses expand and the industry grows, is free market economics. And that's what agriculture is all about, and so we don't see them, like I said in the beginning, regulating tomato sauce or cottonseed oil or sugar cane, or it's just,
there are like safety regulations, right? You have to be like
OSHA, yes, you follow your safety regulations, and if you're making a food, you make sure it's made in a food grade facility, but you don't pay fees to the state to make sure that you're making your vitamins or you qualify under FDA standards, and you have your protocols, and you have your insurances, liability, but the state doesn't regulate those businesses, and they should never regulate hemp.
Yeah.
And this is the Jack Herrera in me speaking, because we said we can't let them regulate this. And it's happening.
Yeah. What blows my mind is that, hemp is generally regarded as safe, right? For human consumption. You can feed hemp seeds to your baby, your kids, but it's illegal to feed it to your livestock. Like that just blows my mind. And we would be so much farther ahead as an industry if, the animal feed industry was opened up, right? It's just so frustrating to me.
Yes, and I think that the lessons I've learned early on is there's only so much you can do to legislate and pass laws, and then there's a thing called litigation. Like when we sued the DEA, they lost. I think it was like less than a 1% chance that we would win. And I know Dave Bronner from Bronner Soap, he put up a lot of money for that. And I think one time he said, yeah, I like those odds. And so to me, I think there needs to be some massive litigation against the FDA. And that's how things get done quicker and faster. And it creates a case precedent.
Yeah.
And I'll use an example as statin and red rice yeast. Are you familiar with that whole litigation that took place when statin's like $1 billion cholesterol drug, and it's made from a natural rice yeast called red rice yeast. It grows everywhere, in rice fields. And they said, well, we have a pharmaceutical and we don't want anyone selling red rice yeast. It can't be sold as a dietary supplement. And it was a 4-year battle, and the companies that did the red rice yeast won. That's why you see it in Whole Foods and the health food stores. And, instead of taking statin, you can buy red rice yeast because it's made out of the same thing.
Right. That's amazing.
So that's my take on it. Maybe I'm wrong, but from what I see, and with big marijuana, we need to step up and go after the FDA. I believe Johnson & Johnson, did you hear about what they said to the FDA 2 weeks ago?
No.
So Johnson & Johnson basically petitioned publicly the FDA 2 weeks ago and said, you need to roll out at least a phase 1 of CBD regulation. Or whatever you're doing. We need something. And so I was like, well, why is Johnson & Johnson, making this statement? You can Google it. I'm sure you'll.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to extrapolate off of that, they've got something lined up that they could be selling, right?
Yeah. I just did a big trade show in Chicago, one of the biggest ingredient shows, in the United States or North America. And you're seeing hemp pop up, but everyone was just scared because the FDA and most of these big giant public corporations, their attorneys are like, well, if there's a 1% chance that the FDA could, write us a letter or come after us, we don't want to take that chance.
Sure.
But we saw some really big companies that were actually starting to roll out hemp proteins and some CBDs,
right.
Even Ocean Spray. I don't know if you Ocean Spray cranberries. They had a CBD drink.
Oh yeah.
And just speaking with everybody, there's still that gray area. The billions and billions of dollars that's supposed to be on the table is in the closet right now because everyone's like, should we do it? Should we wait? What's the FDA going to do? So that's the elephant in the room.
Yeah. Well, that sort of brings me to my next question here. It's like, how do we get the message of hemp into the other industries? I was talking to I'm blanking out on his name. Sorry. Bill Althouse. I'm sure you know Bill. I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago.
Bill's been around. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Really, really intelligent guy. Yeah.
And so he was on the show a few weeks ago, and his main message was legitimization. Like you have to meet all of the specs and standards of all of the other industries that hemp, can disrupt. We have to sort of get in there and speak the language of these other industries because, what he says is like, the construction people think hempcrete people are crazy, like they think basically hemp people are crazy because they're not coming up with these, like they're not sort of backing up their claims. So I thought it was very interesting. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, and again, just like I was at the big IFT show in Chicago, one of the biggest shows in the world, and speaking with these billion-dollar corporations, it's FDA. If they just either rolled out a phase 1 program, they're putting a kibosh on it. So all these companies want to have, thousands of different hemp products, but the FDA is scaring them. And that's what they all said. Well, we're waiting for, you or I doesn't really care about the FDA because I know the law. I'm not afraid of them. And every single letter that FDA has ever written to a hemp CBD company, they never once said it's illegal. They just said you can't make medical claims. So, if the FDA wrote a letter. They did do one for pet food. I just heard that 2-3 weeks ago, there was a letter saying, well, you can't put CBD in pet food. It's illegal. And that was an eye opener. That was the first time I've ever read that. But all the last 8 years, every FDA letter has never once said CBD is illegal. So, looking at the tea leaves, what's going on? And again, back to the industry. Yeah, we do need to shore up the science and what it is, whether it's the fiber, the hempcrete, the protein, the CBD, all the CBCs, CBGs. Where's it made? And that's what industry does. It self-regulates itself in a free market economy. But when, like I said earlier, the FDA is like hanging over your shoulder and you're a publicly traded corporation, you don't take risks.
Right. Too much money.
Again, I go back to, we need to sue the FDA and litigate them and take them into court, because what they're doing is they're destroying a multi-billion-dollar industry. And guess what? It affects the farmer. Can you imagine when Johnson & Johnson and Kroger and all these huge Hormel, or I'm just naming companies that want to use a hemp product, whether it's plant-based, whether it's cannabinoid-based, whether it's fiber-based. We're going to be growing millions of acres of hemp, but we can't get there until the FDA takes this noose off of our neck. And again, that's from my point of view and my 30 years of experience, is just keep saying that. And I don't have the power to stop the FDA, but I do know if there was a collective, farmers and manufacturers that did go after them because they've stalled, and what they're doing is destroying an industry. Right. Plain and simple.
Right. Sort of in the cradle, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, could that be handled?
The fiber guys. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, can that be handled legislatively? Like, if Congress actually did something, I know that's far-fetched, but because, the FDA doesn't create the laws, so they would have to interpret the laws that the Congress would create.
We have an agricultural commodity, so in Congress it says all parts of the plant are legal. And what they've done is they said, we're not sure if it's safe. This is 8-9 years, okay? They passed the vaccine in 6 months. It's safe, okay? So I believe, again, it's time for a massive litigation, just like the red rice yeast and statin, okay? A $1 billion pharmaceutical versus, hemp farmers growing red rice yeast. So this is big. And again, after all these years, legislation, it's not working now. That's the old way.
Yeah,
the new way
broken.
Is, it's broken.
And
there you go. And we don't have time to fix it because I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm 60 years old. I don't want to wait another 10 years, and same with all the young entrepreneurs out there and the young farmers,
Yeah.
And hemp has brought young people into farming like
It's a
we've never
gateway
seen
crop.
before.
Yeah.
Yes. A gateway crop. I love that. Yeah. And so imagine if it was legal in that sense, that the FDA didn't have the noose on it and we could grow, everybody would be growing a hemp crop, whether it was for fiber and food. And again, the dual crops is the way to go.
And
it just doesn't.
Time is of the essence here, right? Because the climate crisis is just getting worse all the time, and we haven't really started mitigation, right? But we could be doing a lot more towards mitigation. I forget the guy's name, but some quote from a few years ago. He's like, look, climate change you're going to have to mitigate. There's going to be some adaptation and there's going to be suffering, right? And it's the ratio of those three depends on how much mitigation we can do now. And if we're just letting the clock run out, we're absolutely doomed.
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm an optimist.
Oh, I'm an optimist. And again, my optimism is sue the FDA.
Yeah.
and we'll get there a lot quicker.
Is there anything, is that happening? Like, are people coming together to put that together?
I don't think so. It's I think there's a lot more money for these associations to go to DC. Let's lobby. We'll pay our lobbyists. We'll have lobbyists in Texas and California, Pennsylvania, and it's just this whole slow boat to China, I hate to say. But again, as Jack used to say, the Chinese are the ones who started the American hemp revolution. We got to thank them.
Yeah.
And they don't regulate it there. It's a communist country, and they don't regulate hemp there. They don't regulate in Poland. They don't regulate in Hungary, Romania, Austria, the Czech Republic.
Because they don't have reefer madness, because that's what it's all about, right? It's about a fear of the THC.
Yeah, and there's going to be like hash labs. And I mean, when we used to lobby in California in 95, 98, 99, 2000, we would always have the Police Chiefs Association, the Sheriff's Association. They would have a lobbyist who would come and tell the senators and the assembly people, hey, these hemp people, look at them, because we all had tie-dyes and long hair or something. Hemp is a front. They really don't want to legalize hemp. They're going to abuse the hemp, and they're going to grow marijuana fields in the middle. And for years, the guy would say the same thing over and over again. And I think we had 3 governors veto 3 major bills that went to the state of California.
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger vetoed 2 of them. We used to call him the Hempinator.
And I mean, this is way off topic, but no one's died from THC overdose, right? It's not actually a dangerous drug. It's just been, that's been the narrative. So yeah, I don't know, but that's off.
Yeah, I've noticed over the years that there's some people that should never drink alcohol. There's some people that should never smoke pot. Just like, I mean, we all have issues, and some people are just, you got to know and learn, hey, this is not for me. And if I smoke it or do it, it could lead to, serious consequences because I'm not mentally stable or whatever. But it's the people that it's helped has been just
right. Like the other side of that. Yeah. Right. From CBD to, I mean, I think we can credit THC hemp for the Beatles, right? Can I draw that line?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a great analogy. And, moving forward, we keep on seeing these new hemp-derived cannabinoids. Like I think we mentioned earlier, my company, Farmtiva, we created a new company called JuiceTiva, and we've been able to not even extract, but press the plant into a CBDA juice. And the CBDA is like 100 times more powerful than CBD, but you don't see it in the market because the only way you get CBDA is unless you eat the leaves or you juice it right away. So there's all these new foods that are going to pop up, hopefully, once the FDA gets out of our business.
Right. So you're sort of like stuck in limbo with the JuiceTiva. Like that product's not on the market yet?
It is in the market. We rolled it out at the International Ingredient Show, and we definitely, there's some big companies using it. It's kind of like athletic greens or super greens. You just put the powder in your drink and mix it in the morning, and bang, you get 25, 30 milligrams of CBDA, which is equivalent to about maybe 400 milligrams of CBD.
Wow.
But the only way you can get this molecule is, like I said, either eating it or juicing it, or we do a JuiceTiva. It's a liposonic type freeze drying process, and it basically was invented by the military in order to preserve nutrients, vitamins, and minerals to get the frontline soldiers when they're in battle fighting for 24 hours a day. They can't live on bread and butter. They need nutrients and vitamins. And so the food supply was real important. And so freeze drying they invented that for the military to basically lock in all the nutrients and preserve them. And it's bioavailable and water soluble and so forth and so on. So there's so many more products to come from the plant that we haven't even seen. Right. And this is a superfood. Yeah, it's Mike. It's something that we've been working on for years. But when we compare it to like wheatgrass or a dark leafy green, this is just as equal, if not better.
Wow.
With all the vitamins and the minerals, and you have all the phytocannabinoids, and it's water soluble and bioavailable. Most CBD is only 10 or 15% bioavailable, and that's a whole nother subject, but the new subject, hey, this is a food. We can grow this like lettuce. Eventually you go into the supermarket and right next to the arugula will be hemp weeds, and so we just need to get over that stigma. And again, back to the farmer. Once we get there, the farmers are going to be growing this everywhere.
Yep. That's what I hope. But without the farmer, there is nothing.
Yes.
All right. So the JuiceTiva, is that more like a B2B thing? Like you're selling that as an ingredient to other food manufacturers, or is that available? Like, could I go out and buy that?
Yeah, we do sell it on our website, JuiceTiva.com or
Okay.
Farmtiva.com, but our main business is B2B. We sell it in large volume, and people can either repackage it, relabel it. They can put it in their smoothies. They can individual package, 30-day supply, 60-day. They can mix it in the food, and it's not an extract. It's a food. It's similar, basically, in the same legal category as hemp seeds, or hemp seed oil, or hemp protein powder. So it's just basically 100% pure plant. I mean, we take about 100 pounds of leaves, and we use a special variety of genetics, and 100 pounds will maybe give us 3 or 4 pounds of powder. So it's super concentrated.
Cool. All right.
It's definitely going to be, as you know, like the whole athletic greens and super greens is one of the fastest growing trends in the health food industry. So we happened just to roll it out during this expansion of that industry. So it's doing quite well.
Cool. All right. And people can learn about that at farmtiva.com.
Correct.
All right. So how about other like bright spots in the industry in the U.S.? I'm sure you're keeping an eye on lots of different folks out there. Who out there is doing stuff that you're impressed with?
Well, what I'm impressed with in the fiber industry is the textile. So when I look at something, I'm like, where's the money? Okay. Where's the money? Where's the revenue? So a textile fiber has the most value in terms of the industrial hemp fibers. You can do non-wovens and wovens. I was in the clothing industry, the hemp clothing industry, for 25 years. And so I see there's Bear Fiber. I know he's back east in North Carolina near you guys. I mean, gosh, you guys on the Conestoga wagon covers were made right in Lansing, right?
Yeah, right.
Lancaster,
Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Conestoga. So, and that's where Old Ironside, I believe, they grew some of the best hemp fiber there. And Old Ironside, I think the old Battleship, all the fiber was grown there.
That's the one that's in Boston Harbor now, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so the fibers, if we can extrapolate the fiber and actually start spinning it, but the problem is we destroyed our textile industry in America, and everything we wear, whether it's shoes, underwear, or clothes, is either made in China, Vietnam, or Thailand, because we just and that was economics. People said, well, we don't want to make this stuff here. We don't want to pay people to make it. We'll just pay cheap, foreign labor to make it, but
don't want to pay a living wage. Yeah.
Yeah. And so maybe with the cost of everything going up, the industry might revive itself, but all your infrastructure and your spinning equipment to make long bass fibers like the linens that are quality, it just don't exist here. So some of the fiber guys that are going into the textiles, they're doing like a 70-30 blend.
Sure.
But legally with the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission, when you label a textile product, it has to have more than 51% hemp in it to call it hemp fabric. So if it has, 70% cotton, 30% hemp, you cannot legally call it hemp.
Yeah, right.
So when you see the Chinese, I mean, they were the masters of spinning, and also the Polish. I used to supply Converse with all of their hemp fabric out of Poland, and they made a canvas that they used to make for the Russian military, and it was just, bulletproof. Right. And I don't see that here yet. My idea back in the 90s was I was going to buy either a Chinese factory or a Polish hemp factory and just unbolt the equipment and ship it in. Like, why try to reinvent something?
Right.
And so that to me is a real bright spot. And then of course the hempcrete is happening, but it's it's logistics. Where can you ship the hempcrete? You can't really truck it across the country because the volume of it and the weight
It's so
and the price.
fluffy. Yeah, it just becomes cost prohibitive at that point.
Yeah, but I really see again like the bright spots are the Dualcrops, where you're getting a textile fiber or a non-woven fiber, and you're getting CBD buds on top.
Yeah.
And sometimes it depends what kind of fiber you're using. A lot of people, I do consulting, and there's so many consultants out there. And so one of the big things when you grow for fiber, you have to be careful of the lignin. The older the plant it gets, the more lignin goes into the fiber. And when do you cut the plant down? And Chinese taught me quite a bit when I was there in the 90s. And it's just understanding the science behind the harvesting, when to harvest.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, what are you going to produce with that fiber? Is it going to be a non-woven? Is it going to be a textile? Is it going to be a wet pulp-based paper? Or maybe even feed. So there's and the hurd is a byproduct. It could be used for pulping,
mm-hmm.
but the price of wood pulp is $50 a ton. So you can't compete. Yeah. Why is somebody going to pay $1 for one sheet of paper when they can get a wood piece for a penny?
Right. But then if we can throw in like the environmental cost of tree pulp, right? Because people don't really think about that. I mean, maybe they're starting to a bit more, but these trees have to grow however many years before you can pulp them up. And then we need those, what are they, the boreal forests around the sort of top of the planet? Like, we need that stuff. We shouldn't be chopping them down for toilet paper. We could be. I
agree. And I want to put a shout out to my friends in California, the Riverdale Hemp Factory. They're one of the larger growers in California of the Jinma and the Hane, which grow
mm-hmm.
like 20, 25 feet tall.
Yeah.
If you've ever been in a hemp forest, I suggest you go into one.
Okay.
We were there last year, and they had plants that were 20 to 25 feet tall. And it's 105 degrees out. You walk into the hemp canopy, and it's like 30 degrees cooler.
Wow.
It's in the high 80s.
Yeah.
And what they're doing out there is just incredible with the fiber and building like tiny homes, building houses right there. So one of the big things people should look at as a farmer is to vertical integration.
Right.
So if you can process on your farm, your chances of being successful are like 10 times more, because if you're just going to sell your fiber, there's not a lot of money in it. Do the math. So vertical integration for the farmer, and we see that as the future. Or cooperatives, you team up with other farmers and buy the equipment, and that's the way it's going to work. But again, if they have to jump through all this regulation and pay fees,
no one's going to. Yeah,
they're not going to. Yeah,
right.
That's why they're farming. They don't want to be involved in all this regulatory red tape.
The vision I have for hemp, it's like, we've seen these global supply chains and how just weak they are, with war, climate, health issues, COVID, et cetera, and we need to establish local supply chains, regional supply chains. And I have, the vision of lots of hemp being grown right next to the manufacturing plants, the processing plants. And I don't know, I'm an idealist, I'm a dreamer, but we have to dream big, right? In order to get to the world that we want to be living in. And I think hemp is the perfect thing for that. I'm not convinced that everything needs to be hemp, but I think everything needs to be agricultural based, right? The farmers need to be sort of the engine of industry rather than the petroleum and the oil companies.
Yeah, as Jack used to say, we need to go back to a carbohydrate based economy and switch from a petroleum based economy. Anything you can make from a petroleum molecule, you can make from a carbohydrate. So that's, and we're seeing that happen. I mean, again, when I was at the trade show, everything's going, all these huge companies, they're doing plant-based foods.
Mm-hmm.
And we're realizing we can't eat meat 3 or 4 times a day. People need to eat meat, but the sustainability just to even sustain the water we're using to feed animals, because our appetite in America is, pretty, everyone wants a T-bone steak 3 times a day. And I got nothing against it. I'm just saying that we need to balance it out. And
but yeah, like you're threatening people's livelihood as soon as you start saying, well, we should eat less meat. Right. So it's like we need an entire paradigm shift. Like the mindsets of people need to shift into, I don't know, the next phase of human existence, which I really hope is, a regenerative mindset.
Oh, yeah. I was at the Hormel booth, and they had plant-based pulled pork. And so their market, they were going after Muslims and Jewish people because they don't eat pork, but now they can eat a pulled pork sandwich made out of plants. And I was
kosher,
like,
plant-based pork. Okay.
Yeah, it's $1 billion industry. It's like, okay, it's sustainable in that sense. But
I keep waiting for like consumers to rise up and be like, we demand, our food to be, more sustainable, or our clothing needs to be regenerative. Where are the customers? Where are the consumers? I assume they're all just distracted with their phones and their financial problems.
Yeah, I'm seeing the younger generation, the Zs, this whole new generation of kids that that lived through 9/11. They've lived through all of the transitions we've had in the last 20 years. And they're very inclusive, and they're very open, and they don't like what we've done. and so the change is coming, but it's just as our society, I see it, we want things cheap, we want it now, and we don't understand the economics, and we're starting to now with all the whole food supply and the food chain, and just the whole entire economics of this global supply chain has just really torn things apart.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, it's not sustainable, exactly. And we're seeing that.
Well, I tried to end it on a bright spot, but then we got sucked back in. But Chris Boucher, it is great talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Eric, I really appreciate it. And anytime I'm here, and I would love to circle back, and any questions anyone has, I would love to, answer. And I really appreciate you having me on. It's an honor.
Yeah, well, likewise. Thank you. All right, so there you go. Chris Boucher, hemp pioneer. He's been in this space a long time and has some great stories, and I really enjoyed talking to him. What did you think about this interview? I would love to hear your perspective on anything you heard here, so please drop me a line. You can always email me. Send it to podcast@lancasterfarming.com. Oh, but I did want to clarify a couple of things that we talked about in this episode. So Chris mentioned that Johnson & Johnson is asking the FDA to make some kind of statement on cannabinoid regulations. And so I'll just read you a little bit from this story on MJ Biz Daily. The story says that drug maker Johnson & Johnson has joined the chorus of businesses asking U.S. health regulators to develop basic safety rules for cannabinoids in foods and dietary supplements. Speaking to an advisory panel of the FDA, an executive at the company's pharmaceutical arm suggested the FDA could start to chip away at the unanswered questions about cannabinoids such as CBD. All right, and then also during the conversation with Chris, I said something to the effect of, I think we can thank the cannabis plant for the Beatles. Now, I don't mean we wouldn't have had the Beatles without cannabis, but something happened, right, that changed the course of music history, and it involved the cannabis plant. I think it was August of 1964 when Bob Dylan introduced THC hemp to the Beatles, and everything sort of changed musically for them. Correlation is not causation, but something happened, right? Something changed. How else would you explain the fact that Paul McCartney dreamed the music of the song Yesterday? Came to him in a dream. It was after that meeting with Bob Dylan. So I don't know, just throwing that out there. I would like to talk to Paul about this, so if any of my listeners know Paul McCartney or know how I can get in touch with him, I just want to have a short conversation about hemp and cannabis and music, and he does grow hemp on his farm in England, so I think we'd have a lot to talk about. So just throwing that out there to the universe. All right, just stating my intention. I would like to interview Paul McCartney. So, let's see what happens. A couple of years ago, I made a little segment on the show for Hemp History Week where I shined a little bit of light on that meeting. I'm going to replay that segment on the end of this show after the credits, so make sure you listen to the end to hear that again. All right, and then also Chris was talking about planting hemp in California in 1994, and there is some awesome video of that. It's on YouTube, and I have embedded that video on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com, so check that out. All right, that's it for me today. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper. Say it with me, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online, get yourself a subscription, all that stuff. Okay, until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper. Season 2, Episode 28 is copyright 2022 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show is written and recorded, edited and produced by Eric Herlock. Any music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow. Okay, and on a much lighter note, my last hemp history nugget takes place on August 28th, 1964, in New York City at the Delmonica Hotel, where John, Paul, George, and Ringo were staying. They had a visit from a folk singer from Minnesota, a guy named Bob Dylan, who proceeded to introduce the Beatles to marijuana, thereby changing the course of music forever. Apparently, under the right circumstances, THC hemp can have profound musical consequences. And so the story goes that Bob was under the impression that the Beatles had already been introduced to marijuana, mostly because of the lyrics to the song I Want to Hold Your Hand. The Beatles are singing, I can't hide, but Dylan thought they were singing, I get high, I get high. Well, I guess you can blame it on a simple twist of fate. Happy Hemp History Week, everybody.